All right, last week we spent a lot of time on talking about sackcloth and ashes and fasting and mourning. So we finished up Esther chapter 4. But I want to go back to it just because it leads into chapter 5. And Matt came up to me after class and he made a very good point. And so I want to reread just a few of the verses at the end and everything and kind of go over a point that Matt made after class, which I told him he should have said it during class so y'all could hear it, but he said, well, I was still trying to figure it out in my head what was going on. So let's go ahead and flip over to Esther chapter 4, and let's go ahead and start in verse 13. And again, in verse 11, what we've seen was Esther kind of saying, hey, I can't just go to the king. The law is if anyone just enters the inner room, they will be put to death unless the king offers out his scepter. And then Mordecai sends a response back, and verse 13, then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. And so what Matt pointed out to me was maybe Esther realized right here that Haman was not going to remove her family name. There's only one that can do that, and that's God. And so maybe that was what caused her to recognize, I have something to do. This caused her to heed Mordecai's warning to her. Haman didn't have that power to remove her father's house's name, but God does, because what did Mordecai say before that? Relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews. So he's recognizing that there will be deliverance for the Jews. God has made promises in the end. He knew that. He knew there would be deliverance, but there was only one person that could remove her family's name, and that is God. God is the one that can remove that. God will provide deliverance, but he can also remove the family's name. And so it kind of shows, and this may be why Esther then responds back. So starting in verse 15 of chapter 4. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way. And thus I will go into the king, which is not according to law, and if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. Who did Esther want to fast? I didn't point this out last week. It wasn't just Mordecai. What did she tell Mordecai to do? All the Jews in Susa. Yeah, find all the Jews in Susa and fast for 3 days, day and night. And myself and my maidens will do the same. So there had to be something more there. And don't you find it amazing? How could Mordecai, at her command, go and find everyone in there and say that? The word had to spread quickly, didn't it? So they could all be doing the same thing. And we discussed about fasting and what that was all about, and when we've seen it in the past and stuff, and why the Jews did it. So it was not just Mordecai. She wanted all. And how often do we, when we're struggling, do we seek everyone to assist in going to God? Or how often do we just keep it to ourselves and say, this is my struggle, this is my problem, and we don't offer it up to the saints to assist us? As Esther here offered it up to all the Jews to go and fast, be part of this. She didn't just keep it to ourselves, and too often I think we start to think of our struggles, our faith, it's our own, and we forget that God didn't intend that at all, did he? We're a body. We're all part of it, and your struggles should be my struggles. My struggles should be your struggles. But what usually gets in our way? Pride. And we're going to be talking a lot about pride tonight, because we're going to see a lot in chapter 5, a lot of pride happen. Go ahead, Eric. It was. Yes, it was a concern for all of them, because they were all going to be annihilated, killed. I mean, that was the edict that came across that Haman wrote, and that the king allowed Haman to use his signet ring to pass. But Esther, when realizing this, she didn't just say, I'll take care of this. I'm going to fast. I'm the queen. She offered it up to all the Jews to assist and to go to the Lord, or to fast, as it says here. It doesn't talk again. We know that there had to have been faith in here, and you're going to see more of it. You're going to start realizing, yeah, there's no way this all just happened by coincidence, because there was a lot of things that happened here, and there's just no way God's hand was not involved in it. And you should clearly see that God's hand was in this whole thing. So we learn another characteristic of Esther there. We also learn another characteristic of Mordecai Didn't Mordecai, what did he do? He went away and did just as Esther had commanded. So he also is one of obedience, right? He recognizes that. Now, some might say, but he wasn't obedient to Haman, wasn't obedient to the commands that he was to bow and show honor to Haman.
Well, that was against their religion anyway, to bow to another person like that.
Bow in order to worship, yes. But no, you'll see examples in the Bible where there was honor paid and bowing was acceptable.
But he was commanded to bow, and that.
Yes, yes, the king made a rule, though, that you are to bow and show honor towards Haman, the guy that he has put ahead of all the princes and everything. But it doesn't say to worship, so we don't know. And there again, like I said, I'm not going to speculate. Why? Because we never got an answer, right? There was no answer to be found anywhere in there why Mordecai did not bow down. Mordecai did not answer when asked it. So I'm not going to speculate why, but we do see that he is willing to obey commands. We are starting to see that characteristic of him. So we can't say he is just a defiant person. Now does anyone have any comments before we go on about chapter 4? I really didn't give you guys an opportunity last week to make any comments about it. We kind of got to the end there. All right, let's go ahead and get into chapter 5 then. Now it came about on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, in front of the king's rooms, and the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room, opposite the entrance to the palace. And it happened when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. And the king extended to Esther the golden scepter which was in his hand. So Esther came near and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said to her, "What is troubling you, Queen Esther? And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it will be given to you." So we now see that there is a lot of favor the king has towards Esther, right? What did we see at the beginning? What did we say about King Ahasuerus at the beginning? All of his banquets, all of his flashing of what he has. It's pretty prideful, right? He really wanted to show off that which he had attained. And now we're seeing him even willing to give up half his kingdom if Esther just requested it. Shows that there was a lot of favor the king had for Queen Esther right there, that he was willing to even give up half his kingdom if she requested. Verse 4. And Esther said, "If it please the king, may the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, that we may do as Esther desires." So the king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther had prepared. And as they drank their wine at the banquet, the king said to Esther, "What is your petition? For it shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be done." So Esther answered and said, "My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and do what I request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet which I shall prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king says." So one of the other things I noticed about Esther studying this is she didn't just rush right in either, did she? She was told of what she needed to do. She said she was willing to do it. She took her time. She had others also fast with her. And here she kind of delays it a little more too, right? It's not just rush to decision, not to just throw it right out there. Why is it important that we kind of slow down sometimes before we react? What happens when we act abruptly a lot of times? We make hasty decisions, right? And is it usually godly? No. No, if things aren't going our way and we had the power to react, we act ungodly a lot of times, don't we? We act showing our pride, because you're going to see Haman do that here in a little bit. But here you see Esther. She just kind of hold on, let me get things in order. She doesn't just rush into things. She doesn't use her power abruptly. She doesn't address, because what do we see about King Ahasuerus? I mean, if he doesn't hold out his golden scepter, so he definitely has some rules, right? And she recognizes those things. And so she must recognize some of King Ahasuerus, too, of how to approach him. And so you see that in her, that she's using, I'd say, wisdom in the way she's approaching things. Verse 9. Then Haman went out that day, glad and pleased of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand up or tremble before him, Haman was filled with anger against Mordecai. So there's that stinking Mordecai again. Appears again, still not bowing down, still not showing honor. And it says, this time it says, tremble before him. Well, why would he expect trembling? Power. There's an edict out there right now, isn't there? Huh? Yeah. I mean, so of course Haman's expecting him, hey, he's going to show me honor now. He's going to bow down before me now, isn't he? Because guess what? I got an edict out for the Jews. Haman and Mordecai still refused to bow down. Mordecai didn't even tremble. That caused what in Haman? It filled him with anger too. So it's one of those angers that's just kind of eating at you. You're ready to react. You're ready to do something about it. So now we see what Haman does. Verse 10. Haman controlled himself, though, at that moment. He's controlling himself. However, went to his house and sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches and the number of his sons, and every instance where the king had magnified him, and how he had promoted him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman also said, even Esther, the queen, let no one but me come with the king to the banquet which she had prepared, and tomorrow also I am invited by her with the king. So obviously, since that's the first thing he goes to his wife Zeresh, what's he tell her? Look at all that I have. Look what I have accomplished. I have been known. The king has shown me honor. The queen is now showing me honor. Along with the king, I'm the only one invited to this banquet. Look at my number of sons I have. Very prideful, right? You're starting to see all the pride. And then where does he go to in verse 13? Yet, all this does not satisfy me every time I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. So Mordecai was enough to anger him so much that everything else he has accomplished, this Mordecai has just quashed all that by him not trembling, him not having fear for Haman. This was kind of like the ultimate power for Haman. If I could just get control of Mordecai, then I'd be great. But this Mordecai, he's right there. Then Zeresh, his wife, and all of his friends said to him, have a gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the banquet. And the advice pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. So, of course, Zeresh and all his friends, they instruct him to go ahead and have gallows made, approach the king the next day, ask the king to have Mordecai hung. This pleased Haman. Haman liked that idea. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this Mordecai now. I'm not going to wait until the 13th day of the 12th month for him to go. He's going to be gone now. Now you're going to start seeing there's no way these things just happen by coincidence if we get into chapter 6. You're going to start seeing. So all this happens. Haman gets frustrated with Mordecai. He gets the gallows built. Now he's starting chapter 6. During that night, the king could not sleep. So he gave an order to bring the book of records, the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. Now, what do we know was written in the book of Chronicles that are about to be read? It was mentioned earlier in chapter 2. Yes, Mordecai reports of the two guards, right? The two eunuchs that guarded the gate, that they wanted to take the king's life. So we know that's written in these books of Chronicles. Well, how many more things do you think are written in the book of Chronicles? Because you remember, King Ahasuerus was one that liked to show off his wealth and the things that he's accomplished and his pride. He also went and tried to overcome the Greeks, so that you know there's lots of things written in their chronicles. But guess what story comes up? What is the story that's read to the king? Verse 2, and it was found written what Mordecai had reported concerning Bethana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who were doorkeepers, that they sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? Then the king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. So the king said, who's in the court? Now Haman had just entered the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows, which he had prepared for him. Coincidence? King can't sleep. The story of Mordecai is read. Haman's got a plan to have Mordecai hung. Coincidence? Providence. Yes. So, I mean, that's what I said. As you read this, you know God's hands involved throughout this story. And this clearly is showing it, and it's going to even show it more. Verse 5, and the king's servant said to him, behold, Haman is standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what is to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor? Where do you think Haman's mind went? To myself, right? I mean, I just got done telling my wife, look at all the king honored me, that he gave me even, put me above all the princes, look at all my sons, look at all my glories and riches. He just went through all that the day before. So, of course, Haman's thinking to himself. And Haman says to himself, whom would the king desire to honor more than me? Then Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king desires to honor, hold on. What is to be done? I'm going to go back to verse 6. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what is to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor? And Haman said to himself, whom would the king desire to honor more than me? Then Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king desires to honor, let them bring a royal robe which the king has worn, and the horse on which the king is ridden, and on whose head a royal crown has been placed. And let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble princes, and let them array the man whom the king desires to honor, and lead him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. Haman really built this up, right? It was looking pretty good for Haman in his own mind. Life's going to be good. He's going to be honored before all men. What slipped from his mind, though? What was Haman's whole purpose of going there that morning? To have Mordecai hung. He hadn't even got to that to the king yet. As soon as he's brought in, what's the king tell him? You tell me, Haman, what should happen to the man that the king finds honor in? So all those thoughts just went away, right? His thoughts went to his pride again. His thoughts went to, oh, yes, look at this. Verse 10. Then the king said to Haman, take quickly the robes and the horses as you have said, and do so for Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not fall short in anything of all that you have said. I don't think he's going to bring up Mordecai to the king now, do you? Well, king, that Mordecai out there, I had gallows built. I want him hung. that's gone, because the king just made Haman, told him to do all that he said, that a man that's going to be honored by the king should happen. Haman is to do it. So verse 11, so Haman took the robe and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city square and proclaimed before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried home, mourning with his head covered. Picture changed pretty quick, didn't it, in a day? Yes. Yes.
It's not working out good for me, and yet Haman had to really show composure and respect, and he had to, I mean, can you imagine cheering for somebody that you don't like, or something that you don't like, and you got to cheer for them regardless of whether you don't like them or not?
Right? Yeah, to show honor, to praise them before everyone, and someone that everyone knows that you despise. I mean, Haman disliked the Jews altogether, right? Because remember, he wanted to annihilate all of them. He didn't just want Mordecai gone. Mordecai was just a good reason for him to do it. Now, he really disdained Mordecai, though. Did not like the Jews, but he really disdained Mordecai. He wanted him gone quicker. And so, yes, now he has to show praise. He has to honor him, show the king's honor to Mordecai in front of all the people that know that he was the one that just had an edict wrote. Matt.
You don't build a gallows 50 cubits high just to kill one man, right? You build it 50 cubits high in order to send a message to everybody else about what happens to someone who doesn't show you honor. And similarly, God's hand comes to play here. He is going to be made to publicly honor Mordecai.
Yes.
And he's going to be made to humble himself and lead him about. Really interesting how God responds to the will of wickedness as compared to the will of righteousness.
Yes. Yeah, if he didn't hear, I mean, Matt was pointing out how he made it 50 cubits high. This wasn't just, I'll be with you here in just a second, Eric. It wasn't just a way to just show his death. He's going to display anyone that dishonors him. He's going to make it so it's seen by all that they know, if you dishonor me, here's the gallows. And how God turned it all around and made Haman be humbled, and how God will turn that pride completely around. And that was probably just as bad for Haman right there as being hung, of having to do that, right? I mean, sometimes it's like, yeah, I'd rather death than do that. Have you ever heard that saying? Yeah, there's times where you definitely would. Go ahead, Eric.
We have found that 50 cubits is 75 feet. Yeah. My mom says 75. Okay. I think we get a ladder to get up there.
Yeah, that's what Matt was pointing. It's way up there. It's full display. This wasn't just to kill him and be done. He was going to try making a display of it. He put it that tall of gallows. There is no way that he was not trying to get everyone's attention for this. How do we see Haman returning home? With his head covered. Yeah, like a whipped pup, as Ray said. I mean, this was the most humiliating thing for Haman. So verse 13, and Haman recounted to Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and Zeresh his wife said to him, if Mordecai before whom you have begun to fall is of Jewish origin, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. Now, do you think that was the response Haman was expecting from Zeresh, his wife? She just made it pretty clear, didn't she? He's not going to succeed. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hastily brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. I'm going to stop there tonight, but I wanted to go over and look at some of the Proverbs in regards to humility and pride. Who did we learn in the book of Esther so far? What was one of the things we learned about Esther herself? She was humble. And now we see the complete opposite with Haman, and we see pride. So flip over to Proverbs 16:19. Proverbs 16:19. It is better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. What's that proverb telling us? Okay, verse 18 then. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling. It is better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoils with the proud. What's pride going to lead us to?
Well, I've heard pride before fall, I know that.
Yes. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling, the fall. It is better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. It's easy to get caught up, isn't it, with those that are successful on this earth. Yes. Yes, and that's what I think he's trying to get across here, because with that pride comes destruction, and it also causes stumbling, a haughty spirit. When we start to get too full of ourselves, when we start to think that way, what do we neglect when we start doing that? God. We start to rely on self, less on God. We start to rely on the things of this world, less on God. It keeps putting God second, doesn't it, when we start to put the pride. And where's it going to lead us to? Destruction. It's going to give us haughty spirit, which will lead to the fall. It's going to destroy us. So we have to, I believe that he's just trying to remind us, don't get caught up in the spoils of this world. Remain humble. Stay with the lowly in spirit. Because if we stay with those that are humble in spirit, what's that help us with? Our own humbleness. Because what's a humble person do? They realize where things come from, right? They realize who's in control. They realize that all good things come from God. And they help us be reminded of that. When we're around those that have much, we can get caught up in the wealth of this world. We can get caught up in the beliefs of the world that we can do anything, we can attain anything on our own. Flip over to Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22, starting in verse 1. A good name is to be more desired than great riches. Favor is better than silver and gold. The rich and the poor have a common bond. The Lord is the maker of them all. The prudent sees the evil and hides himself, but the naive go on and are punished for it. The reward of humility and the fear of the Lord are riches, honor, and life. What have we seen so far in the story of Esther? The humble Esther. Yeah. Yeah, we're seeing that this proverb through the story of Esther, it's right there, isn't it? And what did it remind us of, though, the rich and the poor? What do we have in common? God made them all. We all have the same maker, don't we?
Esther didn't become haughty.
No.
She obeyed Mordecai just same as she did when she's a little girl, when he was her dad.
She did, and she continued to show reverence, didn't she, towards Mordecai and honor by obeying that which they said. Who else did she also obey? There was another.
She obeyed the eunuch, because when she was under the care of the eunuchs and they were taking care of her, she listened, and one guy told her what to say to the king. No doubt the woman will bring all this kind of stuff that she may please the king, but Esther obeyed that guy as he told her.
Yeah, Hagath told her what to bring.
And so she did that, and because she did that, the king must have found favor, because she listened to the guy, because she brought what the guy that was in front of her suggested that she bring, instead of what probably the other woman brought. I don't know.
Yes. No, you're exactly right, Ken. That's exactly, yeah. So she shows that she's willing to be obedient.
So one question that I have for you, and I should have asked this earlier, and I'll make this real fast. If I was gonna, okay, if I had a problem, and I came to you with a problem, okay, and I said, hey, Mark, I need to talk to you, and, we get together and talk about this. I wouldn't take you to IHOP and get, pancakes and something like that, eat for lunch today. And then he said, well, gee, Mark, I think tomorrow we'll get together and we'll talk about it. Maybe it was a cultural thing they did back then, but if I have something that I need to talk to you about, I'm not gonna take you out and buy you a pizza and say, well, gee, Mark, it's nice to talk to you, but can we get together tomorrow to have a talk about my real problem? I wanna get it out in the open, I wanna talk to you about it, and I wanna solve it. I'm not saying you and I have a problem, I'm just giving you an
Right.
example.
Yes.
That you and I can talk about the problem. I mean, yeah, but it might be nice to share a really cutie Christmas food at IHOP or pizza, but my main concern is to talk to you. One is, apparently, I think I have a problem with you, which I don't, but
Right.
if I get it out in the open and not say, well, gee, Mark, I don't think I'll wait till tomorrow night, because they'll give me a whole night to stew about it, and then, I'm like, Mark, we give me more time to stew about it.
Well, if you want to try it, you can invite me to IHOP. I'll take you up on it, and then the next day you can invite me to pizza. But right. So no, that's what I said. I think Esther used some wisdom there, and she knew how King Ahasuerus was, and it wasn't just to approach him abruptly and go hard at him. He has great honor for Haman, doesn't he? Yes, King Ahasuerus has shown great honor towards Haman. He even gave him his signet ring and allowed him to write the law and endorse it. You don't just go right at the king and say, Haman's doing this. Wait, so she's doing it in a way. Remember, what did she just do before she even invited him to this banquet? She fasted for 3 days, and she had all the Jews fasting that were in Susa for 3 days as well. She gained some wisdom, and I believe that was God giving her wisdom of, here, this is how you do it. Because too often we use our own wisdom. We use man's wisdom, and we've seen what Haman used. Haman went right to man, didn't he? Went right to his wife, went to his friends, got their advice, and we already are starting to see the fall, right? We're starting to see things go backwards for him. Go ahead, Glenn.
Go back to what she did for she went to the king dressed in her baby garb, and he saw her and offered the scepter. She could have at that point asked him for it, but she knew he wasn't ready to grant that favor at that point, because she hadn't won enough invite you to this dinner, this lunch. I'm gonna have you and Haman come, giving opportunity for things to happen. And then she realizes again, it's still not ready. And I'm going to do this again because she's continuing to build a favor. Building favor the whole time with the king before she asks what she wants, because she's wanting him to grant her something unusual. And she's not ready to just go in there and ask it the first time. She realizes that.
Right.
And she realizes it even the second time. But all the other stuff going on in the background, she's seeing that play out too. And then by the time, the second time it comes around, now she's going to ask for it. Because she's built up enough credibility with a hazard that people listen to in a way that's going to be favorable.
And he did say 3 times to her, you'll see the third time, where I'll give you half the kingdom. You tell me what you want, even up to half the kingdom, and it is yours. And
I will be your partner. What he said, I will be your partner. I will make you even with me, is what he said to her. And that's not what she's really wanting.
But I think though, we do have to recognize though that she did some things, and there's definitely godly intervention happening here. And she's not just jumping into things. No, exactly. No, because you're right, because it even says here, and
I'm saying that as she's looking at the situation from a godly perspective, she realizes it's not time yet.
yes, yes,
We need to wait. And I think that we need to understand that too, and we may need to take more time in order, before we just address what our problems are.
right. Well, it's just like we read here in Proverbs 22, verse 1. A good name is to be more desired than great riches. Favor is better than silver and gold. Yes, she had to have that favor with the king. And, because we know before she even went to the king, how many days has it been since even she's seen the king? 30 days. The king has not called her for 30 days. Go ahead, Steph.
The thing that I can learn from Esther is that if you put out you want something, it's so important to you that you're going to approach somebody else and say, I'm asking your favor, right? She knew she had to show him how much weight this favor was really going to be to her. So she showed up not assuming that this was like favor that he was. She wanted to convey the power of what she was going to ask. Like she would show up, that was one step to risk her life. And then to say, I'm continuing for you. Let me show you, I'm not showing up to be handed. That's the best practice today. You're going to ask for a favor. Have in mind something that is worth, right? Somebody says, what's it worth to you? Be prepared to learn. So she shows up ready to serve. And then not only that, she does another thing to it. So she's really convinced, like, even though he's ready, she's like, no, wait, it's even more important to me to do this right now. Like, let me do even more for you. So he's getting the idea, so really, it's not verbally, it just matters a lot. She's thought about it.
I like that. I like it from a woman's perspective, too, because us men don't always think like women do, and we don't recognize things quite how you... Go ahead, Ron.
Haman, we can learn a lot from
Mhm.
Haman. It reminds me of a saying my mom had, because all of us boys, we knew exactly what she meant when she said, son, don't get too big for your riches. And that's exactly what Haman did. He was in good favor with the king, but not as much as he thought.
Yes. Yeah, as Ron said, Mom's old saying, I had the same saying, don't get too big for your britches. We all knew what that meant, and here Haman clearly showed he got too big for his britches. And go ahead.
Jesus was with God. He was equal with God. He's in heaven, and he humbled himself and put on a person's body and lived on the earth.
Yes, the greatest example of humbleness that we'll ever see. And as Leroy pointed out, that Jesus was our greatest example. I mean, he was with the Father, with the riches in heaven. He humbled himself enough to come to this earth to die for us. And what greater humbleness than that? Yes. Yes, no, and yeah, we because in 12 months, what was going to, or it's less than 12 months at this time. I believe it's, it'll talk later about they're in the 3rd month. So there's really only like 9 months left. And the Jews were going to be annihilated. Mordecai was going to be gone anyways, and Haman in this part of the story couldn't even wait for that, and because his pride was so much, he let his arrogancy, his haughtiness and conceit get the better of him, and it's going to end soon. Next chapter we'll see that, but the bell's about to ring. Any other comments, Karen?
We read earlier in Esther how obedient she was, obedient to Mordecai. And so after the fasting and the praying, we're going to assume that she is being obedient to God. And that's why she's doing what she's doing. She's listening for God.
Yes.
Tell her what to do.
Right, God will reveal when it's His time and stuff. And like I pointed out in Isaiah, they were told that there would be, that He was going to save His remnant and stuff, and they expected things to happen quickly. They thought they were going to have a great king. They thought all that was going to happen quickly. There was going to be someone to save them, but everything's done on God's time. God's in control of all and has all things under His control. And so we just need to remember that, and He's going to reveal things to us if we seek Him out. He will protect those. He will not let the humble fall. The pride, He will bring destruction and fall. So we need to be looking at our own selves. Oh, Karen?
Yeah, and the whole time we were talking about all of this, I was thinking of in Isaiah 55, where God says, my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. And how we would have solved this whole thing is often the opposite of what God does.
Yes,
And it's just that much more amazing, isn't it?
it is.
Because it's so opposite many times of what we would have done.
Yes. Because we see a lot of Haman in ourselves, though, too, don't we? That we make those same bad choices because of our pride. So we forget to look to God. All right. Well, thank you for your time. And next week, we'll pick up